Now the union is saying it quite openly. They want to end this coalition in the next few days or weeks, if socialism is not pushed back here in Germany. And if the SPD didn't do a complete 180-degree turn, then they would now be putting pressure on Friedrich Merz so as not to lose the CDU completely. There is a lot of fear here that the CSU could split off from the CDU because the CSU might fall below the 5% threshold. At the same time, I was able to intercept an email that is really causing a stir within the CDU, and if you want to support this channel, I would really appreciate a like and a subscription. And with that, I'd say let's go to the first clip.
Half of the gross domestic product is handled by the state, and Helmut Kohl once said reaching 50 is essentially entering socialism.
The election polls that came out yesterday, the day before, and last week have caused a frenzy in the CDU. Why? They're losing so much ground, and of course now they're afraid. They're also expecting to suffer massive losses in the upcoming elections, like in Lower Saxony and North Rhine-Westphalia. At the same time, they're also expected to lose these elections badly in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern and Saxony-Anhalt. For example, there might be AfD-led single-party governments. That's why Carsten Dinnemann wrote in his email yesterday that we urgently need to take care of maintaining the coalition, and I'm just repeating what he said. Table Media also wrote yesterday that this coalition is on the verge of breaking up, but that the whole situation will play out in the coming weeks or so. Will be decided in the coming months. And now there is an internal letter that has circulated within the CDU in North Rhine-Westphalia.
Is not social welfare. Millions of citizens will feel the same way.
And with that, they sent over an outright warning letter yesterday. In the CDU in North Rhine-Westphalia, it's spreading like wildfire. On one hand, the SPD is demanding that people forgo salary increases. And at the same time, they're saying they want to turn the pension into basic income support. And that's when things exploded yesterday. I mean, really exploded. The CDU was just in North Rhine-Westphalia. They seriously asked how they're supposed to campaign in the future. And above all, how they're supposed to explain anything at all to the people out there in the future. When you just, yes, I really have to say it, shit all over your core voters on the hardcore of CDU voters. I don't want to repeat what was in that email, but you all know what it was. So now you go ahead, starting from the local party branches, and consider what options you actually have. Now they're starting to think about what options they have to, well, remain capable of governing and how the party could even survive in Germany. And which firewalls need to be torn down. Only now has the CDU realized that things definitely can't go on like this. By the way, Table Media confirms this as well, not just me. Die Welt has also reported on it several times, and
let me also say this at a central point. The pension in Germany is not social welfare. It is a benefit, a promised benefit for the lifetime contribution of workers in this country. Not everything called reform is real reform. For example, if anyone thinks they can reverse the reform of the energy transition, I can only say that will not happen with the Social Democrats. Because we can see right now in this crisis that there is only one way out, and that is the path toward renewable energy.
And what he is saying here could cause the next coalition dispute. Friedrich Merz is seriously saying that pensions are now becoming basic income support and essentially a social benefit. In the future, it won't matter at all whether you pay in beforehand or not. We need a social welfare system. And Friedrich Merz believes that there isn't as much welfare state anymore, while the SPD, of course, stands for the welfare state. But when it comes to possibly scaling back renewables, which is what the CDU urgently needs to save costs, then the SPD is out. What do you actually mean by that? By 2030, at least 80% must have been supplied by green energy. Yes, nuclear energy, in quotation marks, is green energy because it doesn't produce any CO2 emissions. While gas power plants are not green energy because they emit CO2, and if you now try to save this economy with, for example, gas power plants, then the SPD is out. The SPD will not go along with that, but at the same time they also won't promote nuclear power. And if the goal of climate neutrality by 2045 is not guaranteed, then the SPD will no longer go along with this plan and will even break up the coalition itself. They didn't even make that completely clear in the press statement yesterday. How should we interpret all of this? I found a great report from Die Welt about it.
But I feel like something is missing when it comes to the SPD and pensions. When you talk about it, it's always a bit hard to distinguish what's reality and where it starts to go a bit into the realm of fairy tales and into this.
Let's stick to the hard facts then. Should politicians pay into the pension fund in the future, like they do in Austria, for example? No, that was rejected. For example, do we want to have the Dutch model with those 3 pillars they have there to keep the pension system stable? By the way, the Dutch system is the most secure pension system in the world. No, way too many people would have to pay in here, like the self-employed and politicians, for example. But what does all of this have to do with the climate issue and the breakup of the coalition? It's simple. PCK Schwedt has now received the information that 20% of the oil will be lost. The Kremlin announced that yesterday. No more oil will be delivered to PCK Schwedt, which is causing an energy shortage. Ms. Dirk, I showed it yesterday, from Ackermark, has now spoken of a critical blow to the infrastructure and jet fuel supply. That means that PCK Schwedt can now only operate at 60% capacity here. And if you continue with the green climate ideology, the one that the SPD also has, then you have to expect that in the very near future, transport reliability here in Germany can no longer be guaranteed.
Is progressive economic policy. They say the state has no problem at all, it can just print the money itself. And then we just go to the bank counter at the Bundesbank every week.
Lars Klingbeil will be talking to people like that today about how the German economy could somehow be saved. And of course, that statement really hit like a bombshell. Back then, when I was 16 or 17, I also thought, why doesn't Germany just print as much money as they want? And what does all this have to do with the CDU? Let me explain that briefly, because it would destabilize the global economy. And if it simply doesn't work, if there isn't enough food for everyone on this planet, then it should be clear to everyone that you can't just provide for them completely with money either. If there isn't enough gasoline, then you can't provide for everyone, no matter how much money you throw at it. I think that's definitely clear to you. Write it in the comments below. But that's not quite so clear to the left-wing or progressive politicians, which is exactly what's making the CDU even more furious right now. Because it's not only pointless to just print money, but also extremely dangerous to put the country even further into debt. Back then, we accommodated Lars Klingbeil because they were in the government and had a rough idea of what we were getting ourselves into. That's how this gigantic debt package was taken on, but the CDU won't do that again because the poll numbers don't really speak in favor of the CDU. And now the CDU has simply realized, oh God, we're sitting on a huge mountain of debt. Our own party leadership lies to our faces non-stop. They're squeezing us from every angle. We don't feel like it anymore because we don't have real CDU anymore. Instead, the SPD dictates to us like in a dictatorship what we have to do and what we can't do. And Jens Spahn doesn't need to stand up anymore and say, yes, we've accomplished so much as the CDU, because they haven't accomplished anything at all. And that's the reason why the first state association in North Rhine-Westphalia, which has elections next year, is now going all out in protest. And leading the way is Hendrik Wüst, who would rather work together with the Greens.